The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
Welcome to our next installment of our collaborative between the Middle Tennessee Writing Project, the Center for Educational Media, and the English 4500 Teaching Methods class. Today, as our guest, we have Steve Jones from Rocky Fork Middle School, and he is going to be presenting on the golden circle of grading writing. What, when, how, why?
Well, that sounds so philosophical, and it is, right? I mean, think about it. Grading is one of those things that is the foundation of everything we're going to do in the classroom, because that helps build the culture. I know you've had lots of really good people who've already talked to you about the things that you're going to be doing when you get behind that door and you've got your kids for the first time. It is so exciting. And I wish I had had something like this when I was in your place training to be a teacher. It would have made my life so much easier, because all of the things that you've been learning has been very, it took me a long time, the school of hard knocks, to try to figure that out. But I want to loosen everybody up some, okay? Not that you look uptight, but I might be a little uptight, okay? Because, I mean, my agent worked with Dr. Cates here to get this slot for me. We had to hassle with the contract. There was a little walkout threatened. So, there may be some tension we need to break. But seriously, I want to show you something that I like to do with a class. It doesn't matter really which class it is, because the first thing you always really want to do is build a culture with the people. So I need some volunteers. It won't hurt. It'll be fun. I need probably 6 to 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Come on. All right. Come on up front. If we had a larger room, everybody would get up and do it. So, okay. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Well, this is what I do with the students. I say, okay, now we're going to form a circle. Go ahead. Equidistant from your partner. Yeah, that's always good to use those math terms when you get evaluated. Equidistant. Okay. So you might want to back up just a little bit. Dodge the tables. Okay. Can I get in here too? Oh, sure. All right. Because I'm gonna demonstrate. This is a game, a great book, by the way. I know Dr. Case has made a big deal of reading professional literature. You by all means need to do that. Well, One Piece, it's not really professional literature, but it's so awesome. You need to do that. Have you ever heard of the Second City Improv? Yes. Okay. So the book, Dr. Katie McKnight, I had the pleasure of taking a class with her several years ago, and she recommended this book. And she does some of these things, one of which we're going to do right now, called Zip, Zap, Zop. You want to get the kids up and moving, and you want to do something fun. Okay, you ready to do something fun? Yeah! Okay, so Zip, Zap, Zop. We're going to start off, I'm going to show you how to do Zip, Zap, Zop. Okay? Zip, Zap, Zop is designed to build some culture, to teach. Now I teach 6th grade. Okay, 6th graders are, just a walking bag of psychoses, right? I mean, if it can go wrong with them, but they're very easy to get along with. They're very friendly, but they're just uptight about everything. So you got to get over some of these barriers. So Zip, Zap, Zop's a good way to do this. Teaches them how to look at people in the eye. It's always a good thing, right? And follow multi-step instructions. So I'm going to demonstrate. I've got the energy just because I'm starting, okay? I'm going to deliver the energy to someone else. When I do that, I'm going to lock eyes with the person. I'm going to step toward the person and simultaneously do what I call a slide clap. Okay? So, zip. And I say zip. So now you got the energy. You're going to go zap.
Zap.
Then you go to anybody else you want. Could be back to her, could be to me, could be to someone. I always pick on the ones who've got their arms like this. Because they
Pick on him.
Is it Zop then?
and you'd be zop,
Zop.
and then you go zip,
Zip.
Zip.
zop,
Zip. Zap.
Zop. Zip.
Zap. Zop.
Zip.
zap.
Zop.
Zip. Zap. Zop.
Zip.
Zap.
Zop.
Okay, all right. You got it. All right, good. Good job. Now, of course, that's fun, and that is pretty challenging for a class of sixth graders. But one thing I like to use this for is a review. I'm going to give you an assessment.
Dear.
Well, I'm going to grade you. How do you feel right now? You feel sorry for them now? You hear the words assessment, and you hear the word grading, you immediately get a little uptight. Yeah, okay. All right, okay. Relax. But we are going to do a review. So instead of saying zip, zap, zop, I'm going to step out of the circle now. And I want you to say something connected in any way whatsoever to any of the other presentations that you've had so far. So I'll give you about a minute to think about it. It could be a word. It could be a phrase. It could be a sentence. Now, even if somebody says what you were going to say, you can still say whatever it is. If your mind goes blank, and it will, you can say something that's already been said. Okay? But I just want to hear what has stayed with you over the weeks regarding your presentations. You don't mind, do you? All right.
No.
Who's got the energy?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Proofread your sources.
Journals. Gallagher.
The recommended book log.
Mentor sentences.
Oh shoot. Writing is fun.
Grammar.
Right in front of your students. The 40 book challenge thing.
Socratic. I had to get it from somewhere.
Credit seminar. Sorry.
59 Reasons to Read.
Oh. 59 Reasons to Read. That was my book, too. Avoid the teacher lounge, except when you shouldn't.
Colossus.
Cheating and using something from Res 1, technology.
Don't teach at your students.
You. Constructing dialogue.
Serena Williams. I'm just like,
Oh gosh. Mentor sentences.
The golden circle of grading, right?
Ah, that's a great one to end on. Okay, thanks. Let's give them a nice round of applause. Come on, come on. Yeah.
thank you for your idea,
All right.
too. I appreciate it.
Y'all may have a seat now. Thank you very much. Now that's called zip, zap, zop. I highly encourage doing that. As I was listening to you review, I hear those words and the people who presented, because I've worked very closely with all of them. I could see their face and imagine them here, and you've had, I know, a great experience with them, so that's good. All right. Well, what does the golden circle mean? Have you ever heard of that term? Yeah, some sort of?
Yeah. Isn't it something that's, I guess, kind of perfect in itself?
Okay, perfect in itself. You want to add to
I
that?
can't remember where I've heard it, but I know that I've heard it. And it's almost the creme de la creme of a thing, product, or society.
Creme de la creme. Yes, it is the kernel of why we do something. That is the golden circle. Most people, most companies, I think it was actually developed by some person in business, they understand what they do. You know, they make ball bearings, let's say, and they understand how they do it, you know, those machines over there, but they don't really understand why they make ball bearings. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the what we do when we grade and the how we grade. And I threw something in there with the when we grade because that's important too. So it's not really a typical golden circle of the grading writing, but it is the golden circle. All right, you've probably done this before, right? Our principal, Dr. James Sullivan at Rocky Fork, he's big on showing your learning intentions. Okay, I know Jason, when he presented the visible learning, he presented that. I'm pretty sure he said, "All right, this is what we're going to learn. This is where we're headed. This is why I'm here today, is that I can help you initiate some strategy revolving around grading that will reflect the kind of teacher you want to be." So when I share with you what I do in the classroom regarding grading, that is just the way I do it. It is my personal glove that I use to massage the situation in the classroom, okay? So you develop your strategy based on things, but here's what I never did have. I never did have a class like this that talked about the importance of grading. And when I think to all of the difficulties that I've had as a teacher, and they're not many, but it's unavoidable. I mean, you're in a little mini city with all of these personalities, and you're going to have issues. You're going to have to deal with them. But so when I think about the issues that I've had, so many of them have come back to grades. So I was fortunate, I think, in that I taught 14 years, in high school. Anybody planning on teaching high school? Okay, all right. It was awesome. I taught in a little small school, 500 to 600 for the whole county, one high school. I was like one of 3 English teachers in there. So it was a good experience. But I knew nothing about grading when I got in there. And I'm thinking all of the issues that I had with students and the things that I wish I had not done really focused on grading. So after I worked there, I took about 10 years off, did some different things, came back to teaching. And when I came back to teaching, it was like, I have a chance to remake myself as a teacher. You know, all that time, 10 years that I had been away from the classroom, I started thinking of things that I wanted to do differently. Because I did love teaching before I left it, and I still was very excited to get back into teaching. But if I was going to do this job, I was going to do it not my way, because you can't do it just your way, but I was going to try to customize it as much as I could. So that was especially true with grading. So I'm going to share some things as we go through about what happened during that time. So the success criteria that you're going to be hopefully able to do by the time you leave today, you're going to understand the importance of grading in the classroom. That it is critically important how, when, why you grade. And you should be able to identify strengths and weaknesses of popular grading strategies. If you walked into the classroom tomorrow, what kind of grading strategy would you use? So you should be able to understand what to grade. I've done this several times, this presentation on grading several times, and there's always one teacher in the crowd who says, I take this many papers home with me every weekend and I grade them. Why? Why? You know? Well, she was convinced that did good, even though after we got to talking about it, she understood that it was not really very effective. So there are other ways to grade besides the traditional way. and understand why you grade. Have you got something to write on? You can write on the back of that sheet. Did everybody get that sheet, by the way? Grading pointers. My wife wanted to know if she thought anybody would get it. Grading pointers.
Because points?
Points? Yeah. I said, I don't know. I didn't get it till she said it, right? Yeah, they'll get it. What? Grading pointers, okay. So here's what I'd like for you to do. Now, of course, how many of you have had classes beyond this first year, right? I mean, is this your first, second, third, fourth year?
Last for
Last, okay, all right. So you've had some classes, so you're getting ready to go into residency. So you had classes that have prepared you for grading?
It's kind of all mixed in this class.
But this class has. But any other class before?
Yeah, I've had some. Some people are in their last year, and for some people, this is their first class in the education
Okay, I got you. Okay.
program.
All right, but so far, no classes that have related directly to grading.
I've taken grading and assessment, or planning and assessment.
Planning and assessment, okay, but not grading.
But
and
that
assessment.
focus is more on the assessment itself, not necessarily how to properly grade.
Right, like a
every
philosophy of
assignment.
grading, yeah.
Right. More like the state assessment, right? In planning for that, is that right?
It's a lot of learning different ways that you can build formative and summative assessments, but it doesn't really go into how you would actually apply that to the real classroom.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So that's what we're going to practice today. We're going to talk about it, okay? You guys are going to have to talk, all right? So be thinking. I'm going to give you an opportunity very soon. All right, so, the joke is that it didn't take long to think about all those classes that we've had to prepare us for grading, because I didn't have any when I was going to the University of Tennessee. I thought I was very well prepared when I left there, but when I got into the classroom, I realized I was not very well prepared for a lot of the important things, grading to be one. So why don't you just turn to people next to you and just talk about your feelings you've got right now about grading. And I want to kind of eavesdrop.
My brain isn't really in there because I'm focusing on standardized tests.
I used to do quizzes in my literature classes. And I used to do it as a way of seeing who's reading. And, I'd use them as sort of as a jumping off point for class. But,
So many other ways you can go about it.
well, right. So, is that a good use of 10, 15 minutes of class time to do that?
An assessment of your own work we need to work on before the test. I always kind of like those because the teacher didn't have to grade them. There's just the student grading it.
Yeah.
And they kind of would know, I didn't know this, this, and this. I'll study this for the test.
Well, and also, if you cheat on something like that, you're only hurting yourself by doing that.
How do you measure what assignments are worth grading and, what assignments you can just, leave alone?
I wonder if we could get some people to share a couple of ideas about this. This is usually what happens. People start sharing ideas, and then we see that common ground that we're all thinking about when it comes to grading. It is something. So, who's got? Yes, ma'am.
So I already know that I don't want to grade every single paper that I assign, because then I will have absolutely no life, because I'll just be grading papers all day. But I do want to view some of those assignments as this is your practice leading up to these ones that do get assessed. Whether it's their actual informative, narrative, or argumentative writing, letting all the assignments that come before that be their practice run, and maybe give them more holistic feedback than an actual grade.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing.
We were talking about how we liked the idea of grading less, but we were also questioning of where do you draw the line of what to grade and what not to grade.
Mm-hmm. Can't grade it all, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
remember a technique a high school teacher did with us. We would do these pop quizzes before a test, and we'd grade them ourselves so we knew what exactly to study for the big test, that was graded, but the quizzes weren't.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Were those like written essays?
Something like written essays plus like multiple choice questions.
Mm-hmm.
They're all related to what was actually going to be on the test itself. So it's kind of a study guide in a way, if you know how to correctly fill it out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So probably I'm going to assume that most of the assessments you guys give in the English classroom won't be multiple choice, won't be fill in the blank, won't be true and false, won't be matching. Why is that?
Because it's not necessarily a formulative subject. There are some direct, like, this is what you do, this is what you don't do, but it's so much more fluid than that because there's so much room for interpretation and creativity and craft versus, like, here's a math problem, there's only one way to do it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And, sorry if you were going
No,
to start
no.
talking. For me, all multiple choice answers do is it gets the what out of students, but it doesn't get the how and why out of students.
So the depth of knowledge is very low, as in 1, maybe a 2, which is what our state assessments are, except for the writing. So, all right. So I'm hoping that you guys are going to become masters of grading writing. When you grade it, assessing it, using it as a measurement of what learning has taken place. The last multiple choice test I gave was a long time ago. Fill in the blank. No, it's all writing. And we see that with the state assessment that more state assessment is geared toward writing to show what you have learned and show what you know. Okay. All right. Anybody else?
We were kind of talking about trying to strike the balance between grading for growth and grading on an objective standard.
Mm-hmm.
Because on one end, you can't really pass a student unless they've met certain requirements. But on the other hand, it doesn't really seem fair to for a student who can just breeze through and not put in any effort to get an A, while a student who's working his or her butt off but still not meeting like the standard of perfection to not get a good grade.
Right. Fair is not equal, right? Yeah. That's a hard tightrope to walk. You're right about that, and that's what we're doing as teachers when we grade and assess. We want to treat each student fairly so that we give them enough incentive to keep trying to reach that next level, but that means that I have to grade you differently than I grade you. All right. Anybody else? These are good comments. Yes.
Something else. So I was one of those students in English class who could just breeze through and get an A. And a life-changing moment for me was in 10th or 11th grade. I had the same teacher both years, so I don't remember which year. And he gave me a B on a paper. And I asked him, like, why did you give me a B? And his reason was, because I knew you could do better. I knew you weren't trying hard enough. And I was like, man, someone called me on my crap. But that was a great moment for me because it actually made me try harder.
Yes, right. And that's a great insight that we all need to understand is grades can be used quite well as a motivator, especially for your higher level kids. Lower level kids, they don't really care too much about the grade because mom and dad don't care too much about the grade. So you got to get a different attraction working with them. And, 50% of your kids at least are going to be in that category. So, but that's great insight because grades can be used to motivate these higher level students, but they see pretty quickly that there is a game. So how do I get the A? Okay. I love this quote. Could somebody read that out loud for us?
Paul Dressel noted in 1963 that a grade can be regarded only as an inadequate report of an inaccurate judgment by a biased and variable judge of the extent to which a student has attained an undefined level of mastery of an unknown proportion of an infinite material.
Well, now, that is in 1963. Do you still think that holds true, or did it ever hold true for you? Or do you think that's just a bunch of baloney? Or how would you paraphrase it? What was Paul Dressel saying when he wrote that?
It's testing how well you can test. It's not really testing your knowledge on certain things. I remember when I had to take the ACT, one of my teachers told me it's not about the material, it's mostly not about you knowing anything, it's if you know how to take the test.
Right.
And so that's a skill that I didn't really want, or I would have liked something else, something more critical.
Right. And when we give those other kind of assessments, the multiple choice, which the ACT and all those tend to be, yeah, it rewards guessing, right? Or, I mean, you know the knowledge, but let's face it, if you can halfway think your way through the question and understand what it's asking, I got a 50-50 chance of getting it right? Most people do, yeah? All right, any other comments about this? Because this just struck me as what happens so often in the classroom is that teachers feel like they are, coming down and they are making it real. This is the grade. This is the truth.
Well, it kind of tags on to what she was saying about grades are based more on like how well you take a test and not your actual knowledge or retention. And I'm always reminded of Einstein was nonverbal until he was age 3. If you took him to a preschool, they probably would have assessed him as like mentally deficient. But he is also one of the greatest minds that ever walked our earth, but by a graded scale of a system that is not necessarily a full measurement of what knowledge actually is, he would have been a failure.
Mm-hmm. So do you agree with me then that I think for far too long our educational system has looked at grades as this kind of vague and ambiguous measurement that fluctuates? Like if a student took my class, they might get an A, might get a B, might get a C, whatever that means. They go do the same work in your class and they get a different grade. Same work. Do you think that is true? Or are we good enough as humans to be absolutely accurate? Like when you go into my classroom, I'm going to grade you the same as she grades you in her classroom. Can we do that? I don't think so. I think it's very, very subjective. I've had the pleasure of working with teachers around the country in a variety of forums. Online scoring conference. Does that sound like fun? Where you sit? Yeah. Or there was a national scoring conference in Chicago. Went there one year. Worked with 70 different teachers in one big ballroom, and we were looking at papers and trying to. Now we are highly trained professionals. I mean that's what everybody there thought anyway. I know I did. So I'm sitting down there and I'm trying to get trained on this. They didn't call it a rubric. I forget what they called continuum is what they call that. But we spent a lot of time getting trained on this. Now these are people with college degrees and just lots and lots of practice. Yet we still would get together and we would look at a piece of writing and not really be able to come to a consensus, So it just shows how difficult it is what we are asked to do when it comes to grading writing, because we are making that pledge to only assign writing and not multiple choice and other DOK assessments, right? Can I get an amen out of that? Okay. All right, well, you should consider that. Now, that does make it a lot more difficult. Because so, what should we grade? I was walking around and listening to some of you talking about, well, what do you grade? Do you grade every piece of writing that they make? Because if you do, then you're left with no life. Here are some of the things that I started looking at. I started seeing students were struggling writing sentences. So that was one of the things I started looking at more closely. Okay, how can I create a way to get them to write more and write more specific to a standard? Because that's what we are held accountable to do. We've got to tie everything that we do in the classroom to a standard. So some of the things that we do in my classroom is, probably Sarah, who was here last time, probably talked to you about the mentor sentences and using those. Okay, remember that? Okay, so that's a great way to teach all sorts of grammar and conventions, if that's what you want to do. But it also teaches other things in our grading assessment categories: development, language, conventions, and focus and organization. So you can use all these. All right? I think it makes us more intentional when we break it down there. So how about we take a few minutes. What are your goals when you think about grading writing? What do you hope to accomplish? How do you want to push your student further along and learn the standards that you want them to learn? Okay, so could I have graded this? Could I, if you were in my class, I said, okay, everybody just take a couple minutes to write. Could I grade this? If I needed to, because let's be honest, sometimes the boss says, I need you to have X number of grades per week. I know you've read and heard about Kelly Gallagher. I mean, to me, he's the man. I got to hear him speak, and he's just a very down-to-earth individual, but just is passionate so much about teaching. He's got to go, and his administrator requires that he put in 3 grades a week for each kid, despite all the evidence to show that that really isn't the best approach. So we're going to find ourselves in that situation where we have to generate grades. We have to play the game. So could we grade this? Could I go ahead and give you a grade right now based on, because what was I doing while you were writing? I was walking around. I could see what you wrote. I didn't read everything that you wrote, but I could tell that you had a lot to say. If you were writing, are you pretty much learning? Are you a better writer now than you were a few minutes ago because you wrote? My philosophy is that you are. The more I can get you to write, the better writer you're going to become. And that's what I'm tasked with doing, is to try to get you to be a more confident writer. I know, I read that on yours. Okay. What are some other ideas that you wrote down? What do you hope to accomplish by grading writing, since we have to do it?
I wrote, I hope to accomplish teaching my students best practices for their unique writing style.
What does that mean, best practices?
I mean, people write in different ways, so there might be a literary device that somebody doesn't know about that you could teach them that might help them evolve their writing into something else, or beyond their skills that they have at the moment.
Okay, all right. Yes?
I said that I wanted my grading to be more of a springboard of their writing growth, and being able to say, you did so good on skill X, Y, and Z, but I noticed QRS skills in your writing could get some work so that they can see it as a growing, grading as a growth mechanism versus a finality of an ability.
So how are you going to do that? That's a noble goal. How do we do that? How do we communicate with that person on that human level to want to get better on QRS? Because they probably don't really care. I mean, when you get right down to it, most of my sixth graders probably don't care that much about QRS. So how do you get them to buy into the whole approach?
I think you have to buy into their ideas. It has to go back to the context. And if you can show them how building their skills can better translate their ideas, that's why it's important that they can, own and manipulate those skills to have their voice heard in a better way. I think it's all about developing the strongest and most refined personal voice as a writer in students.
Okay.
I think it's also about creating that culture in your classroom of you wanting your students to do better for you so that you can do better for them.
Thanks for saying that, because that's what motivates my students. If they think Mr. Jones cares about them as a person, then they'll go through the motions of writing whatever I ask them to write, and they'll do as well as they can. But if I haven't taken the time to establish that culture, that I care about their voice, right? They're going to lock down and not be a part of what I want them to be a part of, that community. And I know you've heard a lot about that so far, right? That is really, really important. All right, anybody else before we move on? Yes?
I said that I would like my students to be able to articulate what they're thinking in their heads. Because sometimes you can have a thought or you can have an idea, and once you put it to paper, it goes in a completely different direction. And I think them being able to channel that is really important.
Discover their writer's voice. Yes. It is a wonderful day when you see someone discover their writer's voice. Yeah, it is magic. I remember one student in particular last year. She wrote something. I sat down and I said, "Allie, my goodness, that is so interesting how you said that." And I pointed out particular words and phrases, and we had a little 2-minute conversation right there. I said, "Have you always been this good a writer?" She said, "Well, Mr. Jones, I never thought I was a good writer." I want to tell you, that kid wrote her arm off, well, typed, the whole year, because we had made that connection and that I had validated her voice, built the culture, listened to her. So did I grade her writing? Not grading. Not like I grew up having my papers graded. All right. Okay, so let's try our hand at this. Can everybody see this? And maybe somebody could just go ahead and read it.
What I've learned for the last 2 weeks was mostly reading. Reading helping me improve. When I was a 5th grader, I had a hard time on reading, but now I've improved. I can now read like everyone else. I might no longer need to go to intervention. And the last 2 weeks, we've also learned a new game called Zip, Zap, and Zop, and it was fun. And we also learned this game called the Necklace Game, and it was mostly about our week. This week we've got laptops. We might not need our notebooks anymore, sadly, but the good thing is.
So, okay, this is a student I've got this year. This was turned in. So how do I grade this? What would you do? Why don't you turn and talk to your neighbor and share some ideas about how you would give some meaningful feedback or assessment or whatever let's say the boss said you got to grade these. Well, how are you going to grade it?
I guess if you were going to grade it, you could grade it for what all was done that week that you can kind of point out and see that they expressed. And then,
But I think it's also opportunities for discussion. You know, if you're using the reflection piece like that as not something you necessarily have to grade, but you kind of see, all right, this student's feeling has confidence now that...
I'm hearing a lot of really interesting ideas. Why don't we share them more whole group, if you will? Dr. Cates wanted to know the context of this. That would have been helpful, wouldn't it? Okay, yeah. Okay, so you know 6th grade. You know beginning of the year, right? Because it's not too many weeks have passed. 10 minutes, strictly time. That's why it just stops right in the middle. I said, all right, everybody stop. ELL student, just not too far removed from the ELL class. So that puts it in an entirely different context, doesn't it? I mean, 8th grade student, native speaker, then you know, we approach it a whole new way, right? So what are some of the things now that I've told you that, you know, now you can kind of temper your comments. And the question was, the prompt was, reflect on the things that we have done this past week. How have they helped you? So this was really their first attempt at any organized piece of writing. Now I did give them a model, but hers was, you know, not very different, but her words were her words and not like many students will do who don't have a clue. They will use most of my words. She was getting out there in deeper water. So what do you think? I got to grade this. Boss says, I checked your grade book there, Mr. Jones. You don't have any grades. I need some grades. It happens.
So something Thomas and I talked about was grading it as a holistic piece and not necessarily pinpointing like grammar issue or like syntax issue. Grading it more on, did you answer the prompt and did you have a clear message? Right. And it is a clear message, but it also conveys a voice, which is she's proud that she might be moving out of intervention, which is a big thing. And that got us talking about like finding work of our own when we were that age and thinking we were awesome. And then reading it now going, this is garbage. And you got to think, if it's an assignment, did their message get across? And is there a voice with it, or is it a copycat of what I gave as an example?
Okay. So I'm hearing holistic, not really specific. One thing I didn't hear was grammar. Okay. Would you grade this for grammar? No, this is a rough draft. This is like shooting from the hip, right? This is like wake her up and write. So no, we don't. This is not a piece. If you ever grade just for grammar, you would grade for grammar.
We didn't really talk about this, but it occurs to me, can you do it on a pass-fail system? As in, pass is they wrote something down, and fail is they didn't write anything. Can you do it that way? What kind of grades is your administrator looking for?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, I'm fortunate that my administrator pretty much leaves that to me. Now, I do have a PLC member, and we talk about these things, but each person can develop their own approach to the scale. But we pretty much have all agreed to do this. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. The holistic, so we give 4 points. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. 1 is below approaching grade level. That's the bottom. 2 is approaching grade level. 3 is grade level. And 4 is master grade level. Now we equate each one of those with a number. 4, let's go in inverse. 4 is a 98. But Mr. Jones, you mean we can't make 100? Well, if it was a multiple choice test, you probably could. But my message to you is, and they get it, even sixth graders get it, can you always improve your writing? Oh, yes. You can always, so it's not going to be perfect. 100 smacks of perfection. So, you know, I'm not going to get a 100 on what I write. So they get it. You know, in 98, let's face it, that's pretty good. If I'd brought home a 98, my parents would have, you know, given me the keys to the house, right? A 3 is a 93. In our system, that's still an A. It's on grade level. 2 is an 85. It's a B. Oh man, Mr. Jones, that's pretty high. You're going to spoil those kids giving them all those high grades. No, you're not going to spoil them. You're going to build them up. They're going to realize pretty soon, no matter what they do, they are guaranteed bringing home an 85. Huh? I know, it blows some people's minds. Now, 1 means you got to redo it. You have not done this sufficiently well enough for either of us to be happy. I'm saying, look, what happened with this? Did you not understand it? Then I sit down and we go over it and we go, okay, let's do this again. So those are the ones that show up on my radar that when we're writing like this, like you were doing before, I pull my chair up and I start talking to you about, oh yeah, I like how you're using that word that we have been collecting. Hey, you might want to capitalize all your personal pronouns. I, you know, make sure you're So we start that conversation. We're building that culture. I'm validating your voice. I'm taking the time to care enough to look at what you're writing. And I'm getting you better, right? You're going to be better. I know that kind of rocks a lot of people's minds. You mean the lowest grade I give is an 85? But I got kids who love to write. Because the kids for the most part do not care. They care to the extent that who cares? Mom and Dad. So what is this grade showing? Why am I grading? All right, so that's what I was asking myself. So I don't know, because every time I put a grade on a paper, learning is done. There's a lot of research to back that up. When you put and think back to your experience that you shared with us, when that grade pops on the paper, I'm done with that paper. Whew, I'm done. I'm either, you know, Miss A, straight A all the time, never made a B in my life, and you back off, you take your foot off the accelerator, or you're fail, 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 fail all the time, and you go, why should I even try? So we got to learn to make grades the carrot and not the stick. You know, when I was growing up, it was always the stick. You know, it was. Well, yeah, but why couldn't you have done this? And you know, I felt bad, and I thought I was doing the best I could, right? So if we approach it with that angle, that they are doing the best they can, and if they aren't doing the best they can, then what can I do to get them to do better? Then we're going to achieve a lot more success. Now that you know how I grade, what do you think this grade was? By the way, she's never asked that, what her grade was. But I put it in the book. But what grade do you think I put there? 5th grade student, essentially. 10 minutes. Think about the writing assessment category. Is it focused and organized? Pretty much. Is it fairly well developed?
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned voice. Is there evidence that this person is trying to develop a voice, hence the language category? Is enough evidence there to show conventions? I mean, that's a lot better than most. So below approaching grade level, grade level, mastery?
I would say a 3 on grade level.
For 5th grade, yeah.
Yeah.
Approaching mastery, if that's a 3.5.
Yeah. Well, they don't. It's not really that. It's grade level, and then mastery of grade level. So we're always told that we're shooting for a 3. A 3 is where you want them. You want them on grade level. Yeah, that's what I gave, a 3. She doesn't care. She writes every day, you know. I mean, and I won't say all the students do that, okay? I'm not going to lie to you. You know, there are some who just don't really like the mental effort that it takes to write, and they are reluctant writers. But when you approach it like that and you give them an opportunity to discover their writer's voice, most people are more than happy to do that. All right, let's do this one really quickly. Do you, somebody up front want to read this?
These past 2 weeks have been awesome. First of all, we learned how to access teams and assignments, which made the login process easier. Following that, we learned how to also access Outlook from Mrs. Brooks, which taught me how to send messages. In addition, that we learned how to bookmark, which overall made it easier for me to access our different assignments.
Can we start grading these pretty quick?
Yeah.
What would you say on this one? Just shoot from the hip.
4.
4. I mean, look at the transitions. Yeah. Now, true, I've got a chart in my room with these on here, but hey, we got to start somewhere. He used them, 3 different ones. Yeah, 4. I'm thinking 5th grader, essentially, right like that. We can go places.
But
All
think
right.
about how easy it would be to get caught up in the grammar of this.
And that is what almost every teacher who talks about grading, it eventually gravitates back toward is the grammar. But the commas are not in the right place, the period, the spelling, the capital. All right. So I've also been able to work on some of the state level assessment teams and look at, you know, kind of behind the doors on all this. Tennessee students don't need too much, if any, direct instruction on grammar. They're about as, I mean, they're fine. They're about as good, I won't say as they can get, because let's face it, grammar is kind of an abstract concept anyway. And especially with 6th graders, they're mostly concrete learners. So when you try to lay this abstract, like I just say, try to put a comma there where you're going to breathe, okay? If you're going to read this out loud, or, you know, put a period there. Well, I've got another little trick for teaching periods, but, you know, things like that, I just don't sweat that. Focus and organization, development, language. So I've broken it down into these questions. So focus and organization. Does the piece of writing have a beginning, middle, and end? Does it move logically from beginning, middle, and end? If I can answer that question with a yes, they're okay on focus and organization. So we work with some of the other things that will help them get better, like transitions. Development. Does the piece contain sufficient detail and explanation? Let's take a look at it in my classroom. If you look and see what we're going to be doing today, we're going to analyze an informational essay using teams. And I need somebody to be a demonstrator, all right? So everybody else is logging on to Teams, right? Okay. Because what you're going to be seeing on the screen here is what we're going to be grading. We're going to grade it as a team, okay? We're going to grade it. It's on Teams. We're going to be a team. We're going to grade it. So when you look at this whole document, how many paragraphs do we have? All right, Esther? What?
4 paragraphs.
4 paragraphs, okay? What is the structure of our informational essay tell us how many minimum paragraphs are we supposed to have?
4.
4, minimum, okay? So this is the chart that Esther pointed out earlier. Now this has got the 3 paragraphs, it does not have the 4th one down because the 4th one is going to be a rewrite of the 1st paragraph. So what we may be able to see today is us grading through this and see if everything matches up, because it should match up. That essay right there should match up to that. Okay, so we're going to spend some time working our way through this, grading it. So we're going to use a grading scale. Brownie, what's a grading scale like?
So you went from 1 to 4.
1 to 4.
1 was like the worst that you can do.
Okay.
Also, and 4 is the best.
Okay.
And so like.
And 2 is a what? If 1's the worst, 4's the best, 2's the what?
It's not the best, but it can be better.
Yeah. Are there problems with a 2? Okay.
And then 3 is better than that.
Are there problems with a 3 though?
Yeah.
Are there problems with a 3?
Not really.
Not really. No, a 3, no problems. It can be better. It's not like you're the master, okay? But it could be better. All right. So let's take a look. What we're going to do is just read each sentence one by one, and then we're going to evaluate it. We're going to analyze it. We're going to grade it. And since you don't have to worry about it, this isn't yours, this is mine. So you don't have to worry about hurting my feelings. So if you see some problems with it, I may have worked some problems in there so you could point them out and go, ooh, that's a 1. Mr. Jones, you need to work on your whatever, okay? All right, so let's take a look. Aiden, why don't you read the first sentence?
The 10 years before 1930 and 1940 propounded the people living in what we refer to as the Dust Bowl.
Okay, so what do we know the job of the first sentence is supposed to be? Norhan? The main idea. Okay, so we have to ask ourselves if we're going to grade this, because we have to look over here. We're looking, are we staying focused and organized, right? Because we can grade it 1 through 4 on that. We can grade it 1 through 4 on development. We can grade it 1 through 4 on language. We can grade it 1 through 4 on conventions. So each one of those categories we can put a grade on here. So we want to, first of all, look over here. So main idea. Does that first sentence communicate the main idea?
Yes.
Tell me the simple version of the main idea that we agreed we were going to use. We had 2 of them. We had 2 very simple versions of the main idea, and this obviously is not it. Reagan?
The Dust Bowl affected people in negative ways.
Or?
The environment.
The Dust Bowl affected the environment in negative ways. So those are the 2 directions we're going. So the question we got to ask ourselves, Cheyenne, does that sentence do what it's supposed to do? Sort of. It certainly didn't say the Dust Bowl affected people in negative ways, did it? Okay? So the question is, does that sentence revise that idea? Does it use that idea but write it in a different way? Tyler?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to explain this because there's probably at least one person who's not really sure if that sentence did what it's supposed to do. So explain, if you don't mind, to Cheyenne and others why you think that sentence is doing what it's supposed to, creating the main idea.
Well, it says the 10 years between 1930 and 1940 pounded the people living in what we refer as the Dust Bowl, and that doesn't really sound very pleasant.
So I notice you emphasize the word pounded the people. So that's got a negative, what's that word? Connotation. You ever heard that word before? Yeah, you have. Okay. So what Tyler was saying is that word pounded has got a negative connotation. So you see how we can use words to suggest a negative thing? Do you see that? All right. So that sentence right there, I would say, does communicate the idea that the Dust Bowl did not have a very positive effect on the people. It was a negative effect. You agree? Okay. So is that focused? All right, if it does what it's supposed to, it's focused. If it's organized, we can say, well, it makes sense. Does it make sense? Okay. Now, let's go down here. How about the language of that? Let's take a look and see what sort of analysis we can do with the language. Is there anything in that, just that one sentence, that you'd like to point out that it either is positive or negative? Esther?
Well, the word pounded is negative right there. Like, it's a special word, like kind of
Okay.
like negative. Pounded in that sentence, it's like stands out a little bit.
Okay, so you're saying it's a powerful word, it stands out. That's what I meant for you to say, because that's what we're doing. If some of those words stand out and they're very effective, then we would say that is a higher score. Okay, so the word pounded. Do you see any details in there that you think, well, that was nice, I like seeing that? Reagan?
It says the 10 years between 1930 and 1940.
Okay, so that's a little bit more detail, right? Now we go on and describe what that is. That's the Dust Bowl. But now, so okay, based on that, do we have enough information where we can give this one sentence a grade?
Yes.
What would you grade it? Hold it up. Hold it up. 3, 3, 2 to 3, 2 to 3, 4, 4, 4, 3. Okay, so here's what I'm going to ask you. Boy, y'all making it tough for me. Okay, so those of you who said 2 or 3, what would I have to do to make that into a 4 sentence? What do you see missing? Like if this is your sentence and I say, well, that's a 3, you want to know how to make it a 4 because you're gunning for a 4, right? What would you say, Brownie?
What it says, the 10 years between 1930 and 1940 pounded the people living in what we refer to. Like, I think that little, like most of it, instead of having pounded the people, we could probably put damage their homes. Like you could probably get a little bit more detailed.
Oh, damage their homes. Okay, so try to have more sensory language to create a picture. Well, what is the technique that's being used in that sentence right there that we see in the phrase, pounded the people? That we would say, hey, good job, Brownie. I like how you used this in your sentence. What is the this in the sentence that I'm referring to? Cheyenne, what do you think?
When you have two words that have the same beginning.
I don't care if you know the name of it, but you're describing exactly what I want you to pick out. So if you didn't hear Cheyenne, she says, yeah, when you're using 2 or more words in the same sentence or close by that start with the same sound. So pounded the people. What is that called? Alliteration. So, we might as well learn that if we want to. But more importantly than learning what that word is, I want you to see that that technique is powerful and it helps your sentence. Well, let me tell you, Jacob, if you wrote that sentence, I would think that's a 4 sentence. Okay? Don't you agree? Yes. Yeah. That's a pretty strong sentence. All right, let's take a look at the second one. We about picked that one to death. Now, what do you think about this one? All right, go ahead, Cheyenne, read that one out loud for us.
Farmers in the towns that grew up around them suffered physically during this time.
Okay, so Norhan, what's the job of the second sentence of the first paragraph? I like how she's looking over here, right? That's what it's there. Fact 1 is to introduce the fact 1. So does this sentence introduce fact 1? Okay, so it's focused. What is the fact? Tyler?
It tells how people were suffering. Well, not really tells how, but it tells the reader that they were suffering during the time of the Dust Bowl.
Suffering in a general sense. What is the one way that they're suffering in a general sense, not a specific sense?
Physically.
Physically, okay? So we have all that evidence that we know we can use later on when we write this that will describe and prove that they suffered physically, okay? What are we going to grade this one then? I mean, it does its job, right? It does what it's supposed to. Are there any words that stand out?
Suffered and physically,
Okay, you like the word suffered physically. Okay. Is this an especially strong sentence? I mean, it could be better in the wording. Okay, so if we were going to give this assign a grade 1 through 4, what do you think this fairly would deserve? It's not a 1, is it? Is it a 2? Are there any problems with it? Because if you say it's a 2, you got to say what the problem is. Are there any problems with it? No. So at least a 3, maybe a 4. But I'm hearing you say maybe not a 4. Because there's not anything, there's no alliteration there. Suffered is not a bad word. Physically is not a bad word, but is it anything that really stands out?
No.
All right, so probably a 3 then, right? Okay. Let's take a look at the next one. All right, Reagan, you mind reading the third sentence?
In addition, they struggle to keep a positive attitude.
All right, there you go. Short sentence. What's the job of the third sentence supposed to be? Go ahead, Reagan.
Fact 2.
Fact 2, going to introduce fact 2. Does this introduce fact 2?
No. Sorta.
Sorta?
It shows that they struggle, but it didn't really.
How did they? Oh, it doesn't? Ooh. Do you agree with that, Cheyenne?
Kind of. Like,
Kind of?
It's really brief. That there's really
It's really
another
brief?
fact.
Yeah.
Because it's more of a transition.
Okay, there is a transition, so I hear you saying that there is in addition, okay? So there is a transition, so that's a good thing. If it is another fact, how does it differ from the first one that was introduced in the second sentence? Jacob?
Because, they struggle to keep a positive attitude. Like, they're trying to, think they're trying to make this a good thing, but it's technically a hard thing for them.
How is that different from the first one? The first one said physical, if I remember right. Physical. What's this one?
Mental.
Mental. So that is different, isn't it? So the word struggle is a negative connotation, right? Obviously, that means that you got problems. So they struggled to keep a positive attitude. Attitude is where?
Your head.
In your head. So now we have physical problems, then we have mental problems, all right? So if you can't be positive, things are going to be tougher. All right, so what are you going to give this as a score? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Hold it up. Let's see. 3, 3, 3, 3. All right, it looks like the consensus, or it's unanimous. 3. Okay. Except, I would say this person was really trying to do something special by using the transition word. Wouldn't you? So I'm thinking if it's 3 without the transition word, and then they use the transition word, and then they don't come right out and say they suffered mentally. They use the word positive attitude. That's kind of a more, well, I mean, that's up to you. See, what I want you to see is that sometimes it's a little bit 3 and it's a little bit 4. Does it really matter in the end whether it's a 3 or 4? As long as we recognize all those things that it's doing. All right. How about the last sentence? All right, Esther.
You could say that this time might as well be called the thirsty 30s, for it dried up much of the health and spirit of the people living there.
Oh, man, I got to tell you, I like that sentence. I like that sentence. If you don't give that sentence a 4, I'm coming after you. Not really. What? Not really. That's metaphorically, all right? I'm going to ask that you justify why you don't give it a 4. Now, that I've already said that I would give it a 4, what do you see in there also that would back up my claim that that's a 4? Reagan?
There's a literary device.
A literary device, and what is that?
The thirsty 30s. It's a literary.
Thirsty 30s. That's alliteration again, right? Okay. Have you ever heard of the term thirsty 30s? I hadn't either. So as I'm sitting there writing this, I'm thinking, I want to call it the 30s, because it did happen in the 30s, right? We know that. That's our facts. So what can I think of that would kind of sound and go along with and help the reader remember this a little better? Thirsty. And how does it make sense to call it thirsty?
Because people there was no rain, barely even rain, so people back then were probably really thirsty. And it was around 1930s, probably people were thirsty.
So it did not rain in that period significantly for 10 years. So you would think, all right, if anybody's going to be thirsty, those are. What else does that sentence kind of suggest that something else was thirsty?
It says it dried up much of the health and spirit of the people living there.
Dried up the spirit?
Yeah, and health.
Have you ever spent a long time when it had not rained and it was really hot and you just said, I just wish it would rain. I miss seeing the rain. Have you ever felt like that, or am I the only one who's ever done that? Have you ever felt like that? Yeah. So sometimes when you see the rain, after not having seen it for a long time, it makes you feel better. So what would you give that paragraph then, overall? 1?
No.
2?
No.
3?
Not really.
4? What do you think? So 3 or a 4?
Yes. Yep.
3 or a 4, okay. If you'd written that, I'd say that's a 4, okay? You make it a game. You gotta be their coach, not the referee. When you get that idea across to them, then they buy into all this other stuff, okay? It's hard what we ask them to do. Writing is hard. How many of you write on a regular basis? Then you know there is an exhaustion that hits. When you write so much, it's like, bam, I'm tired. I can't write anymore. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 10 minutes. When should grading take place? Well, like we talked about, the boss, he says you should update your grade every week. Okay, I update it. Same number as last week. Why? I mean, if I am assessing, now there's the difference. If I'm providing feedback and assessment to my students, and I don't need to grade, and learning stops when the grade goes on, why should I grade, right? I mean, it starts to make sense when you think about it like from your angle as a student, all right? And you'll be graded plenty as a teacher. So I think I overheard somebody saying this after the student has been given plenty of practice, right? We don't want to play the game until we've run that play in practice over and over and over, okay? You can run the play. You may not be able to run that play perfectly, but you can run it. You kind of know, so, all right, we're gonna grade you now. You got to be very intentional about what you're grading. How many of you have ever taken a test and you felt like the teacher was just trying to get you? Okay, all the hands should go up. Is that a standard, getting the student? No. When you take your ego out of it, when I took my ego out of it and I realized, okay, look, this is about the kid. This is not about me showing I've got power, right? That's the way I felt so many of my teachers use grades, is to exert that power over me. There's a red mark, there's a red mark, and it just whittled me down. My confidence that you wrote about being so important got squashed, right? And I loved to write all during school, but I didn't think I was a very good writer. When you do feel the need to grade those papers, and I do, I'm all online. Everything they write is online. I could log on right now and show you every kid's paper that they did last Friday in the reflection time. which means I get to go home when and if I want to read these, grade these, and I do. I want to see, because I can't walk around and make an accurate judgment just looking all the time. I want to be able to sit down and reflect and go, okay, that's way better than the one before that I looked closely at. So just be real fresh, because one thing I've found out is that when we were in those big scoring conferences, they would only allow us to score for no more than an hour at a time. And if you've ever done that, then you know that they all start looking the same. I mean, I don't know how it happens, but it does. They just look the same. So you got to give yourself a break from it, you know. Be fresh. Be specific about what you're looking at. And this is when I think we should grade, as little as is possible, because learning stops when you grade, when you put that grade on. So this is one of the things that was so interesting talking to Kelly Gallagher, you know. And he writes it in his books, you know. When you put that grade on, the kids are done. So you want to extend that time when you finally have to give a grade as long as you can, because they'll keep working at it. So think about your own experience. Do you think this is true, that grading stops learning?
I don't know if it so much stops the learning as much as it stops the motivation to learn, because then you're like, oh, I got an A in that, so now I don't, you know, obviously I know enough to where I'm proficient, so you just don't really have, you're not motivated to go any further than that.
But should my job be to push you as far as I can get you to go?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though you're like, you can write as well as I can, but I got to push you to do as well as you can, because you, like it or not, that's how you're going to be assessed and graded as a teacher. They're going to take your class and they're going to look at you, where you started, where did you wind up, calculate the growth that you had during that year, and then your effectiveness as a teacher is going to be determined by that. So yeah, we got to come up with ways that will push every student as far as we can get them to go. So when the student falls short of the goal, do we want them to increase their effort? But do they? Not really, okay? We want them to work harder to do better, but when they see, I did the best I could. Like if I had marked that first paper we looked at and given it back to that person and it had, let's say a 75. That's what they see. It's a C. Oh, my parents are going to kill me. Why do I get a C? And when you can't answer clearly to a sixth grader why they got a C, then you got a problem, right? Do they increase their desire to learn? No. We want them to. When we give them a low grade, we work harder, but they don't. Instead, they decide the goal is too hard. They shut down. If I tried to help you, I'm not listening to you, Mr. Jones. You gave me a 75. I'm mad at you. You're not going to hear me, all right? So the feedback is ignored. So with your situation, when you exceed the goal, you're getting A's all the time. Yeah, because I got to grade your paper the same way as I grade her paper, right? When I fall into that trap, then it's going to hurt you and it's going to hurt you, because I should be grading you differently than I grade you. Because now you're going to reduce your effort and we want you to increase it too. And you're going to decrease your goals, setting your goals. I'm getting A's. That's all they're paying me for at home is A's, right? And decide it's too easy, and then I can't talk to her about feedback either. But when you got the B, that kind of got your attention, yeah. So how do we grade? So Alfie Kohn, now these are names that if you want to do your own Google or DuckDuckGo, Alfie Kohn, okay? He's one of the big guys in grading and the research. It's just a subjective rating. Masquerading is an objective assessment. I mean, I'm going to grade differently than you. Like I said, when we get all those professionals together, they're going to see things differently than I do, and we're going to have disagreements. It's very, very subjective. That's what the student looks like when they get that paper back with a red pen, right? That's the way I felt. So I've already shared with you the way I grade, but that's going to be your decision. You got to have something that you feel comfortable explaining to your students. You got to be able to cite your evidence as to why they got what they got. Do you see any advantages or disadvantages with either one? Would you like to turn and talk to your neighbor and right now choose the one that you might be most in favor of?
I don't know, I guess you can put different weights on different things then.
Yeah.
And make grading a little bit easier.
Because immediately the kids are going to be like, okay, what do I need to put the most focus on?
The most you could pull was like an 89.
That's just the worst.
And so I think about that.
Does anybody want to share anything that you... yeah, tell your story.
It was a college experience because it's that beginning couple years of college where you're learning how to college write and how everything works. And so I had this online English teacher, and I was constantly getting a 100 on all my papers, and I was like, wow, I must have figured this college thing out. Like, I am doing good. Like, or I'm doing something wrong, but she's not telling me because I wasn't getting any feedback. So it was always just, there's a 100. And I'm like, cool, I did the paper right. Well, the next semester I had another teacher, and if I missed like a comma, she'd mark like 15 points off the whole paper. Like one mistake. So my very first paper was like, well, you had a comma splice here, and there's like 4 sentence fragments, so you like failed this paper. And I'm sitting there like, well, I thought I was okay because my previous teacher was not necessarily giving me feedback, but giving me good grades. And then I come in here and you're like, no, that's not how this works. And it's confusing. Yeah.
Masquerading is an objective assessment, right? So we've talked about some of the things about turning grading into a carrot, not a stick, an incentive, okay, and not a punishment. So you got that low floor, okay? So wherever you are, I mean, I've got kids who, as low as you can think, okay? I mean, if they write a sentence, I'm high-fiving them like, you rocked it today, because that's it. But they're getting better, all right? High ceiling. Oh no, you cannot touch the ceiling in my class. You can try, and I'll give you, help to jump, but you'll just get almost there. No surprises. Open book. If I'm going to grade you, this is how you're going to do it. Multiple attempts. You don't like that 2 that you earned on that, you make it a 3. Is that more work for me? It's my job. It's my job. I've had teachers go, I don't have time for them to retake this test. It's what you get paid for. If they want to retake it, you let them retake it and make it a measurement of growth. Okay, so just sorting potatoes, I think that's what some of the teachers, they just pass, fail, A, B, C, D, looking at the shape, the size of the potato, one size fit all grading strategy. All right, so getting to the golden circle, why do we choose to grade? That's the question. Why are you grading this? Ask yourself, before you grade it, why am I grading this? Okay, got to keep the boss happy. We talked about that. Keeps the parents happy. Yeah. Okay, I think a lot of times teachers think, I got to give grades because that means next door they think I'm doing a good job, and I got to have all these grades because if I don't have grades, then so-and-so down the hall think I'm phoning it in. Same idea. Shows I'm earning my money. Yep, gave them 5 grades this week. Cha-ching. We just think it's what teachers do. We grade. Are all these what we should be grading for? Maybe making the boss happy. This is why I grade. It motivates the students. If my grade's not going to justify motivating the students, then I'm not going to grade it. All right, so let's wrap it up with this, okay? So to what extent do you agree with this statement? After a grade has been placed on an individual student's piece of writing, learning for that particular piece of writing stops for the student, but begins for the teacher. So should the grade be more about you than them? No?
I mean, because when you're grading, you're only grading upon what you know, not necessarily what they know, right?
Does the grade reflect gaps in what you tried to accomplish? And therefore, maybe a reflection of what you need. Go back to that formative assessment. Is it showing me when I give the grade, if I looked at all of those papers and I saw no one wrote anything resembling anything I thought they were going to write, is that a reflection on them or is it a reflection on me?
On you.
I think I got to look at myself and go, I didn't do a very good job of presenting that material, because if this is all I can get after all that time, then I need to revisit it. I need to come up with a different strategy. So I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is that, sure, we want the grade to reflect what they've learned, but it seems like the grade more reflects what kind of job I did in presenting the material and getting them to learn.